Smiling pretty. There
we go.
Some more than I did. I'm not at the office, so you're just putting it down. Can actually work. What the actual to the actual
No.
number? Say it again, the actual number. Now, what did you do?
151.
That's an estimate.
It's down.
It's an estimate, and but it is greater than private school. Because I knew it was getting up. Yeah, it's very good.
Yeah, that's excellent. That one, and that one.
I'm not saying.
All right, before we get started with the discussion, I did want to make a couple other little announcements. Amitha, will you stand up? All right, Amitha is actually here for her fifth Mises Club meetup. Nothing you don't have is a pin. You've earned that. And now you have bragging rights because your husband doesn't have it. He does not. Well, we're so pleased that you came all the way up good for this event. Well, thank you very much. Thank you. I'd also like to, before we get started, we have a couple of other people. Amitha Sherwood, you're going to hear from. Been here until now, so I'll put them on the spot. We're going to start right over here. But I'll go ahead and introduce him. Bob Luddy, he's been to many of these meetings, as you know. And Bob graciously contributed to this effort tonight. Thank you, Bob, for your great generosity and support from the initial concept before this existed. Now I'm going to ask for Bryson to come up here. Bryson, would you mind? Bryson is his oldest grandchild, I believe. Yes. And he's an 8th grader. More Academy in Raleigh, and I just heard a chess player too. If you remember, Bryson was here last year, and you might not have seen him because a lot of his time outdoors entertaining the younger children in our group, and that was just the same thing for him to do. So I'm also going to give you Mises. I'll bet you'll have it. So they allow you to wear a pin on it. Knowledge, that'd be fun. But thank you for what you did last year. We're just so pleased to see you go against the foot since last year. Good to see you. Are you here today? We're back and help daughter Williams get to trade because she also helped with you last year. The two of y'all talk around for a long time. Kids. It was wonderful. Hey, who else is new here that wasn't here earlier today? Brian Balfour. You're going to hear Brian stand up. This is, who you are. You've actually been to an early meeting.
I've been to a few. Yes. Yeah. Hey, everyone. My name is Brian Balfour. I work for the John Locke Foundation in Hawaii. I live in Euclid, North Carolina, and just happy to be here and talking shortly about my efforts in economics education.
And Brian, you brought some material. Is that correct?
Yes.
What's it on back?
Yes. It's on the table in the back. This is a textbook for high schoolers, history and economics, that I designed and created for Bailey's Academy, but it's now been put together in a package for everybody to use on the web. I've got a business card back there, and I'm happy to talk about it in the session.
That's available now through Press. Is that correct?
The book is, well, actually on Amazon, but yeah, Bailey's.
Wow, that's terrific. Great accomplishment. And you've got now how many students learning from that book at Bailey? A lot.
Yeah, it's for a handful.
That's why you're This is a great thing. All right. That's about Winston, if you are ready. Okay, the topic here. Let me explain our panel, and I'll just introduce them by name. Most of you have met all the panel members. Each one of these brings a wealth of experience in free market education, as well as teaching economics. Over here from my left to the right is Karen Palisek. She is, gosh, we've known you forever through the John Locke Foundation and others, but she now is a professor? Is that correct? What is your title?
Something like
Something like that, okay. Teaches economics at Thales College, where Joe Davison is also. Brian Balfour, you just met. And Dawn, you've met her also through this, teacher of economics at Ardrey Kell in South Charlotte. Did you say that? Is that correct? Lee Borton's my neighbor. It's just delightful to have her here, founder of Classical Conversations, one of the largest, maybe the largest homeschool curriculum provider. Is that accurate, Lee?
I don't think anybody's really done a study, but supposedly.
Supposedly. And Heidi Swick, who's a homeschool mom. I'm going to learn it. Heidi Swick, who's a homeschool mother, was your first graduate, in fact, this year. Congratulations. And there he is. There he is, the first graduate of your school. Going off to the University of Dallas very shortly. To major in chemistry.
His sister's very excited that he's graduating.
I'll bet. And of course, Winston, I suppose I could say we're former colleagues, but I always viewed myself as the make-believe teacher at Thales Academy, but I had the good fortune to work with him for I don't even know how many years ago. And he's gone on to just do wonderful things within the Thales Academy organization, now Thales Press, and I thought he was a good person, and he's a homeschooler father also here, so I thought it'd be ideal for him to run this panel.
You skipped somebody.
Who?
Anita.
Sure, well, sorry, Amitha, we'll do you twice. Amitha's my neighbor, sort of, Whispering Pines, and she and her husband heavily involved with the Sand Hills Community College, also. But Sand Hills Classical Christian School, growing by leaps and bounds. It's a huge success in our area, and you have a very important visitor later this week. Isn't that true? Carol Swain is coming from Carol Swain.
Nice.
And there's a little local connection to that. Some of us wanted to bring Carol over to beat down the DEI efforts within our schools. And I know of her through Michael Patrick Leahy in Nashville, who helped start the Thales Academy in Franklin, and we used our connections there to make contact with her in relatively short notice. So we're very excited she's going to come. Your previous guest was?
We've had Ben Carson.
Ben Carson was there not long ago.
And Pete Hegseth.
Pete Hegseth, that's right. And so it's a wonderful school if you ever get down our ways. There's a lot of options. I mentioned earlier today, last year we broke through the 30% hurdle. That is, more than 30% now of all school-age children in our county are not in government schools. Now, if they were all like Dawn's, it'd be a little different, right? At least if we had classes in Dawn's school, it'd be different. But there's a lot of great options now for young people in our county. Moore County.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Kent, so much for the honor of hosting this panel. I wanted to start off with really just a softball question about what you, members of this panel, what you feel has been your biggest accomplishment in promoting the principles of liberty to the next generation. Kent was very clear with this panel that it's really meant to be a way of crowdsourcing like best principles and practices for promoting Austrian economics to people who may not be so familiar with limited government and principles of individual rights and freedoms. So if we could start off just like what you feel is the best accomplishment they've had in communicating these principles to the next generation, whatever students that you had, regardless if it's one kid in your own household or a network of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of students, but what do you feel has been your biggest accomplishment? Anybody want to start off?
I love starting things. So I think our biggest accomplishment in classical conversations is that we don't use textbooks, that we have our high school students read original source documents, and we teach them through common topics and various basic principles to use those when they analyze any material, and it tends to stick a lot better than flipping through pages and thinking the book guides you instead of knowing that you guide your own education. And if you don't understand something, it's up to you to go research it and go use other resources. So a lot of folks want me to sell their books in classical conversations, and it's very hard because a lot of them are people like you in this room who are my friends, and I think you write amazing things, but as classicalists, we just go to the original sources rather than modern textbooks.
I agree with you. I'm also a homeschooler, and even in my teaching, as much as I use texts by authors, not books. In MBA courses that I teach, because my full-time job is actually at Bar. I've been there for about 6 or 7 years. Set to retire from there. Doing some teaching advice, but when you give students the original courses, the advice, curiosity, and curiosity is the doorway to learning, because they have to do self-learning along the way. So I think that's one of the three-legged for getting people to and not telling them what to think. So avoid text.
As an author of a textbook, available. I actually created as the course. So the textbook is really not necessarily the entire focal point of the course. If you go and dive in material course module that include tons of short videos that are available online, links to essays, book excerpts from authors like me and so it's really not just this is the text. All you need to a lot of supplemental materials that are included in the coursework, and so talking about I think the original question, like our proudest accomplishment in creating this is mine. It was in the making, really a labor of love, and one of the cool, getting to sit on a classroom discussion where this was being taught and the teacher guiding students in a discussion. And I think the discussion that day was the Federal Reserve impact on the money supply, the business cycle, the bus cycle, and to be able to see some students like actually getting it and like answering the questions and explaining that process, and how reserve distorts the economy and influences the business was really pretty awesome. Just to kind of see like the younger generation kind of getting exposed to this, that they're really not going to get exposed to anywhere else. Most any schools, I mean, present company included, of course.
So I teach AP Economics, and that's College Board. So I have to, that's the exam they take in, and they pass that test so they get college credit. So for me, my best is in a way of circumventing the AP curriculum. I teach the AP curriculum, but then I introduce an Austrian perspective, and I introduce old classical economics. So I have my class read The Law by Frederick Bastiat. It's over their head, but we drill it down and get the nuts and then we read iPad, read, and so I introduce articles from Mises.org, fee, and so reading all these other perspectives, and so I go along and we're teaching fiscal policy, we're teaching monetary policy. I'm the good old AP College Board Canadian method. What would the Austrians do? That's my best practices is to introduce the other perspective so that when
leave, the way I find is sending off people that want to become economists and want to be free market economists. So I know I've done
So it's kind of funny because Karen and the first homeschooling parents I met when I was not yet born and then born, I think. So it's kind of funny now to sit on a with kind of the first 10 years of homeschooling. So as a homeschooler, of course, my and I also teach at a local co-op. And a few years ago, I did a class, and so the plan was we were then going to go to a kids' business fair. They could sell their ideas, and so we're working through how to get a business plan, what you're going to make or sell, and so forth. And so that was spring of 2020. So our fair was going to be April 15th of 2020, and as you can imagine, that didn't actually happen. And it was a fun class, and I thought about doing it again, and then I discovered that our co-op was going to teach cooking. More kids to get cookies and go home. But what I've done as a parent in terms of, when the Men's Institute used to let us bring the kids into sessions when we would go to the conference in each year, just kind of stick them in there, bring them out, but they would hear some stuff, so kind of outsourcing that. And then our co-op needed someone to teach economics, and I kind of knew someone who teaches economics, and we talked about the Tuttle twins, which, if anyone knows cartoons and books, are absolutely fun and fabulous. And so we've used that a lot, and by we, I mean I got to teach the kids. Because they can teach babies really well. But it's interesting and fun to see kids that are friends and peers of my kids talking about these concepts. And when the Tuttle Twins has their cartoons on, sometimes during the school year, we get the neighbors to come over. And there's a really good one on blockchain. So, it's for 12-year-olds, so it made sense to me. I thought that was very good. So if anyone's trying to figure out how to work, there's a Tuttle Twins cartoon. But for me, a lot of it is as a homeschooler, especially when we are in the Raleigh area, there are so many options and opportunities available. So there's some classes we teach, some of them we outsource. And that is one of the things that I feel about homeschooling is Stephen decided he wanted to do chemistry. And so this last school year, he found someone to teach him organic chemistry and biochemistry in high school. Who teaches usually math students. So their math teacher teaches at NCA, but in the school group actually cares about what they're doing. Tried the community college, the teachers didn't care what they were teaching. With schooling, ethical conversation group areas, there are so many options to choose what you want to do, and you can do textbooks back, you can do all original sources. And so that's one of the things that I think is really nice about living in North Carolina and living in the United States, where homeschooling is legal and you have so many opportunities. You can, if you live in the right district, or if you live close, if you don't have options, you can design and get your own group of people together.
I think I would say I've made no contribution, to be honest. But we send our kids to a classification school. Our community follows the classical education, which ultimately teaches kids to think, not what to think. So just that, right, leaves young people an opportunity to ask questions, look at what's going on, whether they hear the news, say at a pretty age, that doesn't make any sense. Why is that happening? And so we've had some decent conversations with our children just because they're asking questions. They're kids in high school, so they're at a stage where their teachers are coaches, their teachers are mentors. They're not just telling what to do. And so just the classical education model in itself really allows young people to think. And then secondly, as well already, and I will give my husband more of the credit than myself, we tapped into the Tuttle Twins books, give them to them for Christmas, and they kind of look at us like, what is this? They really weren't excited about that. but my husband was excited about giving it to them. And so they've gotten all the Tuttle Twins, I believe, books. They've had them for several years. And then they came out with the cartoon. And I mean, the funny thing is they thought it was hilarious. And we still could have really great conversations. And just the other day, my 12-year-old asked her dad, she said, "Dad, are there any more Tuttle Twins out?" And he goes, "No, sorry, I don't think there's any new ones out." So it's been really interesting to be able to use more modern languages, but still very Austrian in nature, and be able to teach them simple things. There was one about the inflation monster. Oh, is that one? Yeah. Okay. Maybe it's not on A. There's several families we believe that have been using those Tuttle Twins books, and we've also used the same authors. They have as well, which have worked really well. But again, I just think it goes back to the model of learning, which is very similar to some of these homeschool curriculums, which allows them to ask questions, and their teachers are good with that. Right? They have those discussions, and they're okay to push back and say, this doesn't make sense, and we get to say, yes, we know. Right, it makes no sense. And so that's been, I think, for us just as a family, the way we've tried to highlight, free market. And the other reality is we live in a small area, and a lot of their friends' parents are entrepreneurs and business owners in our area. So we really try to, relate to their parents and their families, and see that, look at how hard they work, right? Look at how much that they grow because of their own efforts, because of what they're doing. So they're able to see some of that through just our community and small business owners.
All right, well, thank you so much. It's wonderful just hearing everybody's background kind of woven into your accomplishments. And I guess piggybacking off of that, a lot of people have mentioned the Tuttle Twins, but what's one text, reading, seminar, maybe a figure, but your favorite lesson, your favorite book to read with students that helps them really to understand principles of liberty? Just to throw this in there, my favorite to read with students is in our 10th grade logic class, we always read Thomas Hobbes's Leviathan, which if you haven't read that book is really scary, but it explains so much that people are so afraid to die that they're willing to do whatever the government tells them. And once that light bulb goes off over a kid's head, it seemingly explains everything, especially since COVID in 2020. But anybody want to go first as far as a book that you personally just love reading with students because it really helps, these sorts of issues just to click?
Well, I have them read the law, which is about this big, and Fee sends it to you at a discount. So I have a class set, but I do have to walk them through it because it's written in the 1800s, and he's talking about the French Revolution and how the French are doing it the wrong way. They're going down the road of socialism, and but the kids begin to pick up on the terms legal plunder, and it does. What's fun is to watch the light bulbs start going off because they start understanding what he's trying to say. And then for iPencil, it's just a really simple little quick book that they can read. My problem is with AP Macro and College Board, I have to move really fast. So we don't have time to read a long book. I am this year going to have them read the Per Byland book along, and we'll spread that out because I do have a year to teach. But I do enjoy teaching the law. I have a poster of Frederick Bastiat in the room too. So I do enjoy showing them that this has been around a long time, that the talk of liberty has been around a long time.
I'll just speak real quick for myself. From an economics perspective, Thomas Sowell's Basic Economics, that just turned a light bulb on in my head when I was young. I had studied a little bit of economics like as an undergrad, and I just found the subject to be incredibly dry and boring. Then I stumbled across Sowell's book, and I was like, I got angry. Basically, I'm like, this is how economics should be taught. Why was I not taught economics in this way? I mean, it's criminal. So that really started my journey. And Sowell's not not necessarily an Austrian, but I would kind of consider him a gateway drug to Austrians, if you will. It really started me down that path, certainly, and I'm sure many others. So I just wanted to give a shout out to that.
I try to get my students to read books. It's a struggle. They're college students, so presumably they are at a level of sophistication where they can understand some of the more complex language and concepts, but they're woefully unprepared. And most of them, of course, are not homeschoolers. So I always introduce iPencil, but when we can get beyond that, I'll have them read some of Bastiat. I love the Candlemaker's Petition, and some of the articles that are satirical but fun, and absolutely on target. Soul, I have used a conflict of visions in my classes with the graduate students, and they struggle. I think they struggle because they resist the ideas more than that they can't understand the language. And then I try other things. I try things that, so I teach a class in innovation and change for the MBAs. It's coming up in fall. I teach at Barton College. That's what my full-time gig is at the moment until I retire full-time. And I am using Virginia Postrell's The Fabric of Civilization. And it is I will call it a long-form case study because it involves technology, science, commerce, culture, art, every aspect of human endeavor, and takes us through the development of textiles from Neolithic to fiber optic and beyond. It's great. It requires that I try to get them curious. If I can get them to be curious, they will look at it as something more than basically the encyclopedia that it is. But it's great. And when you can get somebody interested in this, then they see how things work together. There's so many good books out there that are in the Austrian tradition. Very few are very short and can give them a succinct kind of picture. And I just want to mention this one little book, tiny, tiny, tiny. Icons of Austrian Economics. It is published by the Hayek Institute. It is published in Austria, but it's available online. It's in exactly this same format. So I would recommend that if you've got, it's so quick and it's so concise and it's really very good. So that might be something that you could just use as a sort of, here's what this whole thing is about a little bit, and get them going on that. I don't know that it'll get them excited. They get excited when they see it applied. So this is why you have to sort of make it something that they can actually tangibly access.
When you talked about Thomas Sowell, I love Thomas Sowell. And one of the other things that I do use, because they're short, are the imprimis articles that Hillsdale College puts out. And Thomas Sowell is a writer. I love having him read some of the Walter Williams ones that he's done. And so I can insert those depending on the topic, like we do minimum wage, and I might have them read the one that Thomas Sowell wrote about minimum wage, because they're short and I can have them annotate those, and they get a lot of good ideas and information out of those imprimis articles. And then I have them watch Maverick, the documentary on Thomas Sowell during Black History Month.
So what you guys are referring to, Karen, particularly about getting them interested. So what we like to say in classical circles is that we need to engage their imagination. And you do that best with young children in stories. So two that I would recommend, one's gonna be obvious, so I don't need to talk much about it, but the Animal Farm. And then the other one that is a favorite of mine that we read through classical conversations curriculum is Amos Fortune Freeman. I said it backwards. Amos Fortune Freeman. It's a story of a true man lived during the Revolution. He was black, was a slave, got out of slavery, and the entire book is example after example of alternatives to the welfare system. And it's a beautiful book to read too.
So I was trying to think, we said the Tuttle twins a few times, but I do agree that stories are one of the best ways to reach people. And maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, for a little while, we got into some of the young adult fiction, and like Barnes and Noble had one that was called A Night Divided. Now my mom is was East Berlin and moved to West Berlin right before the wall went up, and her parents were in East Berlin. So for me, that one was very interesting because it was telling a fictional tale of a family that got separated by the wall going up, but it talked about people trying to get to freedom, trying to dig the tunnels, trying to get across the fences, trying to escape from communism. And for a while there as a family, we went through several different young adult fictional tales. And then there was one that's kind of rough, Every Falling Star, and it's a true story of a man who was in North Korea. So that one's a little bit rough, because I wouldn't recommend that unless you have like really advanced high school kids, and a little bit worldly, because awful stuff happens. But A Night Divided, I mean, it's a fictional tale, but it tells you and it shows you what happens when walls go up and the guns always face inside and we're face outside. And so that, I think, was a good story. It's, it's like Animal Farm, it's a great fictional tale, but there's truth within it, and kind of helps you start thinking about how is it different way from what these people went through.
I think this is a difficult one because I'm not really sure all the books they read in school. I know they do read a lot of older and classic books, some of the children's books that maybe a lot of you all grew up with and you didn't think were still being read. But so we already talked about the Tuttle twins. We also have iPencil. I believe the kids have read that. The other thing I think that we've introduced them to, it's not only an economic resource, but PragerU, which they offer videos that are quite short, and again, for preteen, young people, right? They're not necessarily interested to watch too much. So we'd ask them to, pick the ones they like and then watch them. So it's at least exposing them to ideas and information. Again, not only from an economic standpoint, but I know business and other topics are in that resource. And so I think that's another one we use. I'm sure they read, Animal Farm and some, again, a lot of classics. I'm just trying to think of some. I thought I could find the school reading list on the website. I couldn't find it. So I apologize. I just don't know that I can, share more than the few from that.
Well, thank you. And this is wonderful, though, like hearing all of these great books. I mean, just to deepen your own understanding on this topic, like the Thomas Sowell, Basic Economics. 1984, too, George Orwell would be another good one, and Brave New World, just because that's probably the scenario that we're living under right now. I'd also throw out there Road to Serfdom, Friedrich Hayek. My dad gave that book to me when I was in high school, and it just confirmed everything that I felt about the federal government as I was growing up right outside of Washington, D.C., just as far as the meddling and things like that. They also have a really good series of cartoons for the Road to Serfdom, so that would be another good thing, especially to show the kids. I'd love to hear, though, just your best way of explaining inflation to children. So maybe if I got 2 volunteers that could present just the best way why it's not a good idea to debase the currency and print money. Volunteers?
Send them to the Dollar Tree, and then send them to the $1.25 tree with their own cash.
I'll tell you that my kids gave me my own best lesson in inflation. I used to pay them 25 cents for every lesson in Latin that they would do with me, and then all of a sudden the prices just started going up. So it was like 50 cents, and then it was $1, and now it's about it's hovering around $1, thankfully. But they heard me and my wife complaining about grocery store prices, and they were like, "Well, I guess it's time to raise our prices too." So For more of a fun question, though, what's one practice in contemporary education that you would love to see discontinued? Like the thing that is just radically holding kids back right now, what's one policy that you would love to see if you could just give a fiat direction that would be gone? What would it be?
I'll go first on this. Well, I'm a dinosaur, and I think this thing right here has been the worst thing that ever happened to kids. And the reason I say that is because I went into teaching as a second career. So I was in business for 23 years and then did teaching as a second career. So when I started, this is only my 13th year teaching. And so 13 years ago, when I first started teaching, this didn't exist. There were flip phones. And they were not a nuisance. They were not a problem. Kids weren't weird and I have anxiety and I can't. That was not around. I mean, we didn't have it in the classroom. It wasn't a distraction. Kids socialized. And then in 2014, when this thing came out, everything changed. And I saw it. It was like, what? And it's a major distraction. They're addicted to it. And the policies, I mean, every school district's different. We've tried everything, and it's just a mess. And so if I could do one thing, it would be get rid of this. Because I've actually had parents text their children during class. So if parents can't have the discipline with it, you can't expect the kids to. But it is just a nuisance. When they come in the morning, instead of, what did you do last night? And then talking to that, this is what they're doing. And they do this all day long. And so their attention spans are bad. Their self-esteem is in this box. And it's just a mess. And so if I could tell you as a parent, don't have them have this until they're in 8th grade, and don't have any apps on it. I mean, they can text and that's it. But no apps, no Instagram, no whatever it is that they're on, it's just bad. That's just me.
Lee, I totally agree with you about the phones. I don't allow students to have them on their desks or on during class. Emergencies are exceptional. The thing that I would change, I mean, I will refer to the unraveling of the state apparatus in a book that Henry Hazlitt wrote called Time Will Run Back. Actually, that's not the original title. But anyway, he wrote a book about the unraveling of the state. And I would end compulsory education, abolish a compulsory education laws. We would have a lot of education, just as we do now. But we would not be forced to choose between the stuff that you're forced to pay for that you don't want or is not appropriate for whatever plethora of reasons, and have real education. Yes. So,
Here.
Yeah, I second that. When Winston said, what would you abolish? Initially what came to mind is, well, we start with the Federal Department of Education.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Karen really hit the nail on the head there.
I'll just add on yours and abolish all the state departments of education too.
Yeah, that's right.
And the school board.
Stop running for school board and start a school.
Nice.
Yeah, I have a rising 8th grader who just got hopeful when you said 8th grade. Her brother got his.
She ruined it for you.
Well,
I'm sorry.
no, her brother got his last year and he just graduated.
Oh, that's good. You're good.
You kind of need a smartphone to drive sometimes to find places, but if you're not driving. I do, in homeschooling we see less of the addiction to the cell phones, but you still see it at some of our co-ops, and it just drives me crazy. It's, I think, I agree with Karen, get rid of the compulsory education laws. We try to figure out the solutions to it, the school choice, right, where the money follows the kid. You know, I know that we donate to the public school system all of us each year, whether or not you have kids. And I don't know if we're getting what we paid for, if we're getting more than what we're paying for or less, but I don't like what we're getting. And, you know, we're fortunate we can homeschool. We have friends who have their kids in private school, friends who have their kids in public school. And it's just a hot mess. The other thing I would probably suggest is that schools stop trying to push technology on kids so young. They seem to think that if they don't work on a tablet or a computer or something like that when they're in kindergarten, they're not going to learn how to use technology. And it's not true. And our kids were in a private school a couple of years, and they were really pushing the first graders doing PowerPoint presentations. And I noticed that if you put a computer screen in front of a kid that has some sort of education on it, they think screens should entertain them. They don't read it, they want to watch it. So, you know, high school's a little different. You can maybe do stuff online, but I think the push to technology too young is crazy.
I think I would just echo everything that was already said, and what I think we've really enjoyed is a lot of the things we do see in our school are the things we would want abolished. So technology at a young age, our kids were actually doing worksheets up until probably through 8th grade. Only in high school do they get access to a computer, and they can, but they're still not required. Our kids learn cursive handwriting, and that's something you don't see anywhere else. Our kids are not very good at typing, but that doesn't concern me. Right? They will get there, and it's not a big deal. They learn Latin. You know, that's not something you see either. And so I think things that I felt like we all did when we were growing up, actually having textbooks, right, having to write notes, paper notes. I mean, that's things they still do. So for me, it's what they've been doing are all seemingly a lot of the good and right things, and the things they're not allowed to do are what the things that, you know, I'm glad that they're not and shouldn't be. You know, they shouldn't be exposed to tablets and things when they're 5 in kindergarten, right? And that's sometimes what gets touted as, oh, this school has such great facilities and such great resources and all these things, but you can't have a conversation with that young child, right? They can't look you in the face, or they're very anxious, or they don't like to talk to an adult, whereas our kids are taught from preschool to speak to people, to look them in the eye, to sit at a table for dinner with their parents or whoever. And you know, we've seen our children and or their friends, you know, get complimented in public because they don't sit at phones. They don't have phones. Our children don't have phones either. And so while it's difficult, you know, because it seems like you're going against everything that everybody's doing, and young children are at stages, especially middle and high school, where they want to do what everybody else is doing. But I guess my encouragement to any parents is just stick to what you feel like is just the common sense thing. And it's hard, and your kids are gonna probably push back a lot, but just, you know, you're doing the right thing in the long term, and we see the difference. So yes, again, everything that's already been said, but I think what we've experienced is seeing what they are doing, and it's not anything like all of the policies we wished wouldn't have existed. So it's been really nice.
Can I make one additional comment?
Yeah, of course.
I understand the hostility toward inappropriate technology, but if we don't put kids into boxes that have been pre-designed, then the question is, you decide if they should have a tablet in first grade or not have a tablet in first grade. In other words, I think it's the compulsory education laws that force us into these kinds of positions where we're saying, oh no, it's bad, or no, it's good, or you know, it's the mark of the modern age, and they'll be like way behind and they can't do anything. And yeah, we're lucky if we get kids in college who can actually read. It's just lucky if we get them because they've done something at home with their parents, usually, or in a school that was good ahead of time. So I think we have to be careful about sort of like this, you know, no technology and whatever. It depends on the kid, and it should depend on the parent. That's what the market is about. That's what it's possible to do and decide if we let markets operate to, you know, figure out schooling for kids, and parents do that. Thanks. Sorry.
Anybody else want to add anything? Any follow-ups there? So, with technology, it's generally a tool. It depends on how it's used. But for the most part, like phones are going to radically distract students from actually concentrating on the topic at hand. Smartphones are really intuitive, so they're going to pick up like how to use a smartphone like relatively easily. My 4-year-old figured it out without any problems whatsoever. But it is going to be really hard for that kid to figure out how to read, how to write, how to math, addition, subtraction. Those are things that have to be taught and drilled and practiced consistently over the course of their elementary years. Those things aren't going to come about on their own. The sort of liberal arts education that all of us are really in the game of providing is meant to help students be free, to identify the student as being free, prepare them for a life of freedom. If we do that and get that right, they're going to pick up how to use, a smartphone without any problems whatsoever. It's so much harder in this way to teach the student how to read. Follow?
Yeah, I was just going to say, that's the thing about technology is, or anything else. People will say, you homeschool, you're trying to, keep your kids out of the real world. And I think it all is about when you think kids are ready for it. And personally, I think when you get a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, a 12-year-old girl social media, the statistics are that they're much more likely to be anxious. Because when I went to school, I went to a public school, I went to a private school, we didn't have homeschooling. I don't think it might have existed. I'm sure people get thrown in prison for it, but I didn't know anybody homeschooled. And if you had a bad day at school and the kids were mean to you, you came home and you played with your friends in the neighborhood. And now they come home and everything's all about them on their phone, and their whole social life is following them everywhere. And girls, it's more the social media. Boys, it's more the gaming, because those screens are designed to have them want to play, which of course, because they're selling a product, and it does cause the endorphin hits, and it can cause actual addiction. The girls on social media are physically addicted to it, to the things, to the endorphins, and the boys on the video games. Then you can have crossover, but that's kind of the rule. And you'll have an adult to say, well, I play video games and I'm not addicted. Well, you started when you were 25 and not when you were 12 or 8 or 7. So each kid's different, and some kids don't have problems, but for us it was just easier to go, I'm just going to assume my kids will get addicted, so they have to be older before they can do stuff. But other people's kids, they can probably handle it. And then there's people who think their kids can and they really can't. So, but even in Eastern Europe, I taught English there, and I've gone back now, and one of the teachers lamented that with the smartphones. She said the kids are in the halls, they're not talking to each other. They're not interacting with each other anymore, and it's So at least you'd think during the school day if there could be a way to put it aside.
I think Dawn had a follow-up.
Well, I would say different.
Yeah.
I'll second all that, because that's what I've observed, is that the socialization is what's going away, and so they don't know how to socialize, and they would rather spend their time scrolling than what'd you do last night? That's just, it's not intuitive. This should be what they should want to do, but they want to be in this virtual make-believe world where they get all these likes and about what they had for dinner, and look at my shoes and let me take a selfie, and it's just out of control is what I'm observing and what worries me. The other thing is you have to start teaching them, and I get them as juniors and seniors, but this is where they want all their information. So if they can't solve the problem, I'll just Google it. So they're not thinking, or they don't want to think it through. That's hard. What's Google say? And so at home, if you're giving them a homework assignment, are they really doing it, or are they just, what's Google say? So that's the hard part in a public school, is getting them to critically think without always wanting the answer to be what Google says, and if they are scrolling for an answer, are they going to the right site, or are they getting something that's skewed? And so you have to teach them if you're gonna go to Google, then this is the sites I need you to go to. So everything has to be tailored so that you know where they're going to get the right information and not biased or crazy information. So that's a big challenge as a public school teacher.
Yeah, of course.
So I was just gonna add about, we were talking a lot about things we would wanna end or policies in, I guess, maybe more of a K through 12. I mean, I would even say to the next level of higher education, I mean, I would really like to see, and I don't know if this is societal, I don't know if this goes to like businesses and places that hire, but the belief that, right, you go to high school, and you go to college, you get this good job, right? And that's pretty much what you should do. Where this idea of, yes, you go, get whatever that education may be up through that 12th grade, but depending on what you're called to do, right, what your family maybe needs you to do, what your gifts and talents are, right, whether it's trade schools, whether it's giving back to your community, going to do mission work, whatever it might be, but that there's such a stigma, right, about not doing what we think is the progression of what we should do. And I mean, and I did it, right? I'm not saying, right, so that's what I thought, right? My family were immigrants. We thought you go to, you go to high school, you go to college, you go get whatever, job you're able to get. And that was all the best things to do. Whereas as we're seeing, especially what's being taught in higher education or untaught, that really shouldn't exist anymore. And all these, higher education institutions that also have super high price tags, right? Are they really giving young people the value that they're getting for that tuition? So I would even push against what our model is for higher education.
Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, if any of my kids asked me, like, could I become an HVAC technician, Dad? Could I do that when I grow up? I would be so encouraging towards that because I would get free air conditioning service for the rest of my life. So, I thankfully too, I work at a school where we have a very strict cell phone policy. So if you're in an environment where that's a distraction, I mean, try to talk to the principal to set some sort of ground rules that those things are not supposed to be out in any way, shape, or form. Certainly agree with compulsory schooling and things like that. Certainly you force kids to do it, and it becomes the one thing that they don't ever want to do. Like, it's what they rebel against, what they reject. Want to end the panel. We've got about 10 minutes left, so this has to be kind of lightning round. But what's one or two practical suggestions for the people in the audience here to contribute to the common good, promote these principles of liberty, individual rights, and freedoms? Something that any of us could do to really steer the ship in a positive direction. For me, on a practical level, would be reading to my kids more. I love reading to my kids. I love reading Aesop's fables to the little ones and Tuttle Twins to the kids that are, I have an 8-year-old, so that's stuff that we tend to circle back to. Maybe volunteer work. I think some people on this panel might say volunteering at a school or starting a school. Working at a school, I can't donate any more of my time to said institution, but I can think of one really, really good organization that I volunteered for. It's kind of a parachurch group in Raleigh called Refugee Hope Partners, but people coming from Afghanistan or Myanmar or Uganda coming to the United States, they're very easily swept up in the welfare system, but this was a parachurch group that walked alongside refugees coming to the United States and helping them get acclimated and share the gospel with them. So things like that I feel like are really good as far as just limiting the amount of dependence that a person might have on the government to take care of them. So, but what are your best tips? So who wants to go first? Okay.
So one thing I think we've lost a lot in our culture is people who know how to do stuff. Know how to do things. How to build something with wood, or how to, fix cars are a little bit difficult now, but how to fix things mechanically, and especially for people, because if you have your own kids, you read them stuff like that. But there's people who are either grandparents or don't even have kids nearby. If you have a skill, if you know how to work with wood or something like that, see if there's somewhere in the community where you can offer to teach a class or even just mentor people who are interested, because that is one of the things that I think we're losing track of. And yeah, you can go to community college and take a class in welding or whatnot, but it's kind of a little bit more fun if you're like part of a men's Baptist ministry and you guys, fix houses for people and you just grab a couple of kids, high schoolers or whatever that can help do that. So it teaches them skills that I think the generation before me grew up with. My generation didn't see quite as much, and I think the generation now, they might not even know anybody who knows how to use a saw. Or any woman who knows how to use a sewing machine or how to knit or how to crochet or how to cook, right? So that would be my suggestion for anyone looking at how to help kids going forward.
So something that's a passion of mine is to always be looking for alternatives to the welfare state. So for instance, decades ago, we stopped using public libraries. Do you know there's thousands of private libraries in every single state in the union, but nobody even thinks they're going to use them. And so I think a lot of people use public resources because they don't know the private ones exist. And so I personally want to try my best to figure out how to get out of fiat money, and it's great there's so many of you who are involved in that. So I'm involved in Bitcoin and I do Bitcoin meetups. But I know 99% of my friends don't have the money to put Bitcoin aside or the understanding of how it works, right? So we can talk about, like we did earlier, the gold standard and fiat money and Austrian economics and all those things. But I just want to encourage you to figure out what's one thing you can stop doing that's government funded. And then start telling other people you found a way that you don't rely on them as much. We gotta look in the mirror and change ourselves before we'll be able to change the culture. So it's really popular right now on social media to say if it's free, you're the product. That's true for public schools. That's true for public highways. Like I'm working with a group of people for privatizing all highways. Totally possible to do. But people don't know how to do things privately. So that's my encouragement. Find one small thing you can do where you actually pay the bill yourself and then share with your friends.
I don't have anything specific other than I definitely read with your children. And if you want to volunteer, I know public schools are desperate for people to come in at the elementary level and help kindergarten, first, second, and third graders get on reading level. Because if you don't start there, then there's a lifetime of it just snowballs. And in public school, they don't have time to remediate pretty much after fourth grade, and so you're just stuck. But I did want to tell everybody something in case you did not know this. In 2019, North Carolina's General Assembly passed Bill, and I wrote it down because I never can remember the number of it, House Bill 294, and it passed in 2019. Dan Forrest was the lieutenant governor, was a big pusher for this. Roy Cooper signed it. But now in North Carolina, all graduating seniors, and I believe it's private school, public school, homeschool, I think every senior, and it may just be public school, but has to graduate with a semester of economics and personal finance. And it used to be that was crammed into the civics course. And so you taught because I taught this, you taught 6 weeks of civics, or no, it was about 8 weeks of civics. And then we had about 5 weeks to cram Econ 101 basics along with personal finance. So, and as teachers, we were like, this is nuts, this is crazy. And the North Carolina Council on Economic Education, which is a real proponent for teaching people personal finance and economics, was a big promoter of this, and our legislature passed it. And North Carolina is one of the leading states in promoting economic literacy to high schoolers and even middle schoolers. So the state itself is doing a really good job of trying to get more economic literacy to the masses, I guess. But I wanted everybody to know that because I didn't know if anybody knew that was now a requisite for graduation for public high school.
Yeah, so as someone who works for a public policy think tank, my mindset is how can we move public opinion on matters of economics, individual liberty, etc. So I would really like to try to encourage each one of you. I mean, obviously going beyond the educating your children, but study, do the research, become that go-to person within your sphere of influence that people go to. So you're like, oh, inflation. What's going on with inflation? Oh, well, Bob's smart about these subjects. Let's ask Bob about that. Be that go-to person, so you can influence the people in your friend, the sphere of friends, community, neighbors, etc., etc. And so when issues like that do come up, then people know who to go to. And if it's you, and you are, obviously, if you're someone here at a Mises Club event, you're going to be well equipped to have the answers and to enable to present the argument from a free market, Austrian economics based, liberty based perspective. And so, the more people then that go and trust you and trust your opinion, then you're going to be able to persuade more and more people towards that side of things, towards the free markets and limiting government and individual liberty. So that's really, I guess, my perspective, what I would encourage you all to do. And the fact that you're here today, definitely puts you in a very, very small stratosphere of the general public of people who are, trying to educate themselves about these issues. So I want to, thank you and congratulate you all for being here and for the effort that you're all putting in trying to advance these very important ideas.
I have a short list. First of all, I agree with read to your kids. Eons ago, when I worked at the John Locke Foundation and was writing a column called The Free Market Minute, I wrote a column called Read to Your Kids. And the reason is not because the content is important, but because it demonstrates to them that they are worth your time. And that is going to carry forward because some voice is going to be playing in your kid's head throughout their growing years and even into adulthood, and it best be yours. Second, the practicum idea, which is practice at Thales College. The students have internships, they go to jobs, and they are learning to do stuff. And that is an incredibly important aspect of getting a broad and full and useful education. And in that line, I want to promote, or maybe like if you're interested in looking at some of the history of this, promote the idea of becoming a guerrilla educator as a parent. And that is exactly what I brought the book along. A guy by the name of John Taylor Gatto, which you may have heard of, wrote a number of books, including Dumbing Us Down, but this one is The Underground History of American Education. And he was a New York State Teacher of the Year. He used to send the students out into the city to do stuff, to measure the pool at the Y and calculate the volume of water that had to go into it and all kinds of things, get them out of the classroom, get them out of the prison, get them out of the box, and send them to apply and sort of figure out how to do stuff that would be lessons that they could take along with them as they go. So if you can do that as you are educating your students, offering them opportunities to do stuff and flail around a little if they have to, whatever, that's fine, because it will pay off in all kinds of ways. Okay.
I don't know that I have anything much different. I think just the skill of teaching not only your children but even ourselves. I can't say I grew up with a lot of it, but creating things, right, with your hands, whether that's cooking, baking, sewing, right, working on cars, being able to build things, creating things with your hands. And actually, just even in the last 4 years, another thing that we've found to be really becoming a lot more of a focus around where we live is creating resilience around your own food supplies and just supplies in general. And so, whether it's backyard gardens, square foot gardening, if you have acreage, things of that nature where, I grew up in a city and I was always kind of that, I never would have wanted to get into anything like that, but seeing that value, because seeing how it eroded so quickly, right? And seeing that, again, your dependency on other other resources, right, just is not safe per se. So, you know, we're trying to expose our children to trying to start creating things or being able to, you know, figure out dependence or, you know, self-reliance. So I think that idea of self-reliance is, and not self-reliance when it's everything is about us or me or my family, but self-reliance really creates more of a community aspect. So like to me, that goes hand in hand. So being able to help and serve your community or your neighbors because you're self-reliant, right? I think that happens, I mean, that would happen naturally, and that's something that, you know, we're trying to promote as well in our community, in our area.
Well, thank you all so much. This was a lot of fun for me. Let's give our panel a round of applause.
Thank you, and thank you, Winston. I think this was the first time you did a panel discussion. I think you did pretty well. If we had more time, and I'm not going to stand between us and dinner, but perhaps some of you can get back to me. As most of us know, schools outside of public schools have experienced phenomenal growth in the last 10 years. And the businessman in me says, why? And can we sustain that? And are they experiencing pushback? Because anyone in business knows when you grow, you put a big target on your back for the competition. And obviously, how are public schools reacting to that? I would say, at least in Mecklenburg County, they're hiring smart econ teachers like Dawn. It's going to be tough competition for some of the private schools out there, seriously. So maybe you can get back to me on that. You know, it's been exciting to see the growth of free market, especially when I think back of when our children was in school. It was, you know, either public schools or $20,000 a year, and that wasn't going to happen. We didn't know anything about homeschools, so we missed that entirely. So young families today have just amazing options. I'd love to see that, obviously, and even for the public schools. I'll admit it, Bob will admit it, our competition keeps us on our toes and drives us to do better. And it is really true. A rising tide raises all ships. So it's exciting. I think it's a great time for education right now. I'd like to thank all of you, especially those of you who just came up for this event. We're going to document all this, and I hope it adds to the knowledge base for both for just free market education, but also, you know, how do we teach economics and liberty in schools? This is important information to share with others. So thanks again. So for dinner, of course, if you haven't paid yet, you need to speak to my wife. Once you have, though, you go out this door all the way around to the little island, make a right, follow the smoke, and the gentleman out there will feed you. There's a little can out there to put your ticket in. Bring it right back in because we have an amazing speaker coming up, Ken Silva, and he's been working on this. Very exciting talk he's going to give very soon. And they're going to bring dessert in, ice cream, somewhere in the middle of all that. So, dinner served. Thanks.
Thank you, Karen. You opened my eyes.
Hi.